I want Irving to speak, and he has the leads. So sit down, please sit down. I don't sit down.
Sam, wow.
Everybody in. Okay, comfortable?
All right.
Sit up, Candy. Oh, wow. Is everybody comfortable?
John, what's next?
What? All right, hi everybody. I'm John. Listen, thank you all so much for coming. And okay, make sure before you all leave, you fill out a thing about, a memory, and you take this, as many as you want. Candace over there made them up. Okay, I will start. Now, we all know that John talked to everybody, even if they didn't want to talk to him. So, John was on an airplane going to New York, and this lovely woman named Cynthia was ignoring him. And John kept talking to her, and talking to her, and talking to her. And Cynthia started thinking, who is this guy? Why doesn't he shut up and leave me alone? Well, all of a sudden he noticed on her lap was a Jewish prayer book. So he started talking to her about the Jewish prayer book. And then she said, okay, he's not a psycho, maybe I'll give him a chance. So to make a very long story short, John comes home and says, I met the most incredible woman named Cynthia Steinberg, and we're going to their house. And, this was, we're talking, what, 10 years ago? Yeah. And he said, this is funny, he said they're modern Orthodox, and I said, well, can I hug them? Because I didn't know the rules, And he goes, yeah, you could do anything with them. So anyway, make a long story short, Cynthia and Dr. Irving Steinberg and their beautiful daughter Esty, and they have 2 more beautiful daughters. We're like, they're incredible people, and I've invited my friends over to their house for every Jewish holiday, and they've taken me in and my friends in, and they are like the kindest, nicest people on the planet next to all of you. And the first person to speak is going to be Irving Steinberg.
Can we go to the Steinbergs this year, too?
We actually have an adoption agency, so
There's little chances they will be able to.
as long as Joe brings you, it's just. Yeah, John dubbed us as the Super Jews.
Yes.
So we'll stick with that label. I wore my Brooklyn Dodger hat in contrast to John's Yankee hat. Okay, just to know our upbringing, and it's really weird having his picture look right at me. I tell you, it's a little spooky, but then again, so is this place. It's just about as macabre as John is. Really perfect. Glad you picked this out. Anyway, good Sunday to all. Gatherings for John Schwartz are nothing new to me and my family. For every time we were with John, mostly for holiday dinners at my house, it always felt like a gathering. Through the great majority of my life, my friends were always quite conventional until my wife brought home John, who brought along his Joan, who continues to bring others. As you all likely know in your own way, when you are blessed with John, the blessing just keeps on giving. Since I have spent my life in 3 sections of the country, people often ask how I compare the East, where I'm from, to the West, where I am. My standard line is that cities on the East Coast have character, and cities on the West Coast have characters. John had, and indeed was, both. The name Schwartz is derived from Schwartz, which is German or Yiddish for black or dark. Dark is the recesses to which John gravitated to in his work in film, and where his brain and nervous system horribly led him in the end. An end even John would not consider for film. But neither a person's end nor a person's work can ultimately define that personage. The John Schwartz my family and I knew was anything but ghoulish, never dark in spirit, nor black in perspective. He was the rare soul that you can actually see. Soulful beyond appearance or engagement, honest and intelligent, sometimes even professorial, with me, the professor, assigning his grade. When John and Joan would arrive, there was always lots of talk before transitioning to the table for a continuation between bites. Occasionally, it would be two Jews on film. But more often, it was two Jews on a couch talking politics or travel, two Jews on business or religion, sports or spirituality, education or economics, the beach or urban decay, great fantasy or hard reality. John lived most of this much more than I could, with occasional demons but mostly devoted loved ones along for the ride. With Joan his love, Jimmy his greatly devoted brother, and his myriad of friends, all forged John not to be the image of his film's attempt at dark reality, but to be real, and sometimes unreal, light in a world that always seemed to be John's platform for his next big venture or big adventure, for his next big find, or for something that could find something more in him. John was a searcher, but not a wanderer. His aim may have not always been certain, his compass not always pinpoint, but his complexity for us yielded more to an earthy simplicity. He loved my daughter's challah, soup, and brisket. He loved a good read and a better conversation. He loved his loved ones, his dogs, and his friends. The yield for us is that he was unyielding in all of those simple loves. I miss John conversing on my couch. I miss John gracing our table. But best of all, I know John is no longer searching, and his ultimate find is not Schwartz, but it is all Schwartz, and is all light. You can bring them all to the next one.
Thank you, guys. Oh my God. Okay, so, all right. John, maybe you don't know, but he had a problem with authority.
Yeah.
And he always wanted to take karate lessons. So that's him. You just blend it. You missed Irving's speech, but it's on film. Anyway, John always wanted to take karate lessons. So Roger, who is not here yet because Marta, who I love, is from Columbia. She tends to run a little late. Anyway, so John goes to the karate studio with Roger, and for those of you that don't know, you have to do two things. You have to say woos, is that right, Tammy? Woos?
Oos.
Oos. You have to say that, and you have to sweep the floor. John does not do either. John's sweeping the floor, so he said to Roger, like, I'm not doing this. So we're at the dinner table, and Pammy, who is like 3, she says to him, John Schwartz, you have a problem with authority, and that's the one reason why you should take karate. And John looked at her and goes, I'm being psychoanalyzed by a 3-year-old. Well, this 3-year-old is now a grown-up. She's the most extraordinary singer-songwriter. She's brilliant. She's one of the most beautiful people on the planet, and she's going to sing a song. Right, Pammy? You okay? Oh, she's going to get her guitar first. Where's the bed? Okay, you can eat later because you're late. You missed Irving's speech, but I'm sure you know most of these people. Well, that's wrong. You'll meet them later. Okay. Let me see. Okay.
So I'm gonna actually sing I'm gonna sing a cover of a Kate Wolf song called "Give Yourself to Love." Would it be weird if I sat on the floor?
No.
Okay, cool.
Would you rather have a chair?
No, this is perfect. Thank you. So if you know it, or if you feel like you know it, or if you don't know it, sing along. Any of those options. tears and laughter, and give yourself to love. Give yourself to love. I've walked these mountains in the rain, learned to love the wind. I've been up before the sunrise to watch the day begin. I always knew I'd find you, though I never did know how. Like sunshine on a cloudy day, you stand before me now. So you must give yourself to love. Love is what you're after. Open up your heart to the tears and laughter, and give yourself to love. Give yourself to love. Love is born in fire, planted like a seed. Love can't give you everything, but it'll give you what you need. Love comes when you are ready. Love comes when you're afraid. It will be your best teacher, the best friend you ever made. If you give yourself to love, love is what you're after. Open up your heart to the tears and laughter, and give yourself to love. Give yourself to love.
Wow, yeah.
Isn't she amazing?
Yeah, okay, I'll give myself to that.
Jimmy, I love you. Imagine knowing somebody said she's not 3 years old anymore. Please. That was so beautiful. I love you. Come on. Oh. Okay, now I know what I was going to say. See, I think it was fated that I met John because I walked into a video store. Wait, no. Okay, I was in a movie theater, and it was an empty movie theater in Marina Del Rey, and I was sitting on the left side of the theater, and I was with this woman named Sharon. And I said, Sharon, we have to move over to the right side of the theater. And she said, why? I said, I don't know, but we have to do this. So Sharon and I move over to the right side of the theater in Marina Del Rey, and this woman comes walking down the aisle, and she says to her friend, where should we sit? And for some reason, I said, sit next to me. I don't know why, but it was fate. So she sits down next to me, she says, hi, I'm Adrienne, I said, hi, I'm Joan. And we became friends. Now, 2 weeks before that, I was in Pacific Palisades to rent Lawrence of Arabia, and I see these videos on the shelf, and it just stops me, and I went up to the clerk and I said, what sick, crazy person could watch these movies? Okay, more to come. Anyway, Adrienne and I, we go into a movie theater, and John is walking out with his... Well, come up here. This is Adrienne, everybody. She's responsible for me meeting John. That's the point of the story.
Everything out.
Okay, go ahead. I know her for a long time.
Oh, Jesus. Okay, so go back to the 1980s when people used to wait in line for the theaters in Westwood. There was no more calling and getting your seats. We waited in line. So she and I were waiting in line at the National in Westwood for a John Hughes film called Pretty in Pink.
Pretty in Pink.
And we're waiting in line, and the theater is letting out the people before, and I see 2 people coming towards me that I know, and it's John and Jimmy. So John, good to see you. Jimmy, hi, how are you? we chat. I introduced this one to John, who was dating a friend of mine at the time, actually living with a friend of mine at the time. She was living with somebody I didn't know, but I knew she was living with somebody. And they start talking. Needless to say, we end up going into the movie, they take off, and then sometime in the next week or so, John and Jimmy are at my house, and he asks me about this one. And I said, but John, you're living with Sherry, and she is living with, I don't remember his name. Will. Okay. And he said, I want her number, and I said, I'm not giving you her number. Sherry is my friend who I literally met you with, John. And, John is my friend I met at some fucking theater. And, I'm not gonna, it's like not right. So he kept pushing me, and I said, look, I'm not gonna give you the number, but if you insist, I'm going into my purse, where I have my phone book, not Filofax, because you're not in Filofax. I'll have nothing to do with it. So needless to say, he went into the purse, got the number, and then I'm totally in the dark until my next get-together at my home.
Every day.
He comes with somebody else.
Yeah, right.
He came with another girl, not Sherry, but another girl.
I'm in
Totally ignored her.
everybody.
What party was it? This is
Super Bowl.
You sure it was Super Bowl?
Yeah.
You sure it wasn't my Labor Day
No.
annual?
Because the television was on.
Oh, right, okay, it was Super Bowl. He ignored her half the time, and I don't remember, he at some point asked you out, and it was another party I was giving, and you and John did not show up
We
to
went
that
to
party.
Disneyland.
You went to Disneyland instead of coming to my motherfucking party. Why did you do that? Why did you not? I never forgave you. I never forgave you for not coming to that party.
It was love.
Okay, well, all right, so if anybody needs to blame me for Joe and John, I guess you could blame me, or not.
Or fate.
Or thank you.
Or fate.
Or fake, because,
Thank you.
what, did somebody just say thank you?
Yeah.
Oh, I thought meant thank you, I'm done. Absolutely. I basically am done. It's so much easier to talk to a group of 100 actors that I do not know than it is to talk to a group of Joan's friends. But I'm
And
doing
some of them
it.
are yours, and thank you.
Some of them are mine?
Yeah, you know some of these people.
Well, I know a lot of you people here, but in a different way.
In a different way.
Anyway, that is the story of Joan and John's meeting in the 80s.
Right.
And what can I say? It was not intentional, it was, I guess, a fluke. Or
Yeah, yeah. Well, John called me up and said, I'd like to see you, and I said, well, it has to be plutonic. And he said, I can't do that. And I said, oh, you're just a typical screwed up man. And then 2 weeks later, he found out, probably from you, that I broke up. But the thing is, we're up on my deck, and I said, so you're a filmmaker. What have you done? And he goes, I did these movies called Faces of Death. And those were the movies that I saw in Pacific Palisades. And I went, you're the sick person that did these films? And that was the beginning. Wait, the best part was, okay, so I said, John moved in, and I said, well, I want to get married. And he said, I don't believe in marriage. And I said, well, that's because you have psychological problems. I said, you gotta go see a shrink. And he said, I'll make you a deal. Lose 10 pounds and I'll go see a shrink. That was John. Needless to say, I didn't really need to lose 10 pounds at the time. And I didn't. We went to Jamaica. We went to Jamaica, and he basically asked me to marry him at this beautiful restaurant. He got over his fear. And that was it.
But guess who wasn't at the wedding?
Well, nobody was.
Okay.
Because we were in Italy. It was Italy. And then we got married at a Jewish wedding. It's a Jewish wedding, Cynthia.
Yeah, we saw the pictures.
I guess who wasn't at that one either?
Well, no. But there were,
Sherry and Will?
Pammy was there.
Probably.
Well, thank you for
Just following me.
introducing me to
before you got married?
John.
Oh, you I need to talk to. We got business to discuss.
Okay.
I have to be somewhere on Thursday.
Oh, no, we were together for 2 years because we wanted to get to Italy in October. We really had to do, yeah, it was 2 years. But anyway, John introduced me to one of his oldest friends and one of his best friends. And let me just say
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Goodbye,
I love
everyone.
you so for doing this. You Bye, guys. It's a Jewish holiday tonight. Not one of our most famous. Okay. All right. I shall continue. One of John's oldest friends that he introduced me to was Chris Mulkey. And I mean, oh my God! Every holiday, every week, we spent like, I don't know, like all the time was Chris and his. Wait, I gotta say this. I know right now that Chris's beautiful wife Karen is with John, another one of my friends, Paul, and I know they're here, and I know they're smiling down on us. And I gotta say, Karen was one of the most beautiful. Some of you know her. She was one of the most beautiful people, like on the planet. And I know she's with John. And where's Gloria? Paul, who's one of my oldest friends. He's up there. The three of them are making all the angels laugh. I know that. Because John made everybody laugh. Anyway, when Chris's daughter, I'll never forget this, was like 3 years old. I'm holding her hand and we're walking down the stairs and she looks at me and she goes, "You haven't done this very often." And she was so right. And Chris, will you speak?
Oh, sure, yeah.
Yes.
Give it up, give it up.
I love you.
That's good. Thank you for the introduction.
Oh.
This is great. 45 years ago, probably right now, I was at a party in Venice, California, where I live now, and with Tony Plana, a longtime actor, a friend of mine. We were both working at Universal, and John came down with Richie Mizos and all those guys, and we had a drink-a-thon. It was great, and I played guitar, and John and I became friends from hello, basically. It was like so. So that's 45 years ago. Let me crank it back. 4 weeks ago at the New Vista. John's in the chair. Richie's there. He's got his, what's the candy bar? What's the Twix? No, Twist. What's the candy bar? What is it? Anyhow. Oh no, there's a Milky Way. No, it's a Snickers that day. Anyhow, so John would just eat the Snickers without, with great relish. And as it goes with that disease, it's like an AM radio, and you tune it in and out. And, I've been through it with my family and stuff. No, with my father-in-law, certainly not with Karen. She rests in peace. And so John goes, "Mark, I have some papers. I'm not gonna, I'm not gonna screw you. I have some papers that I gotta get to. What, John? What?" And that was that. So that's our. So I, evidently, Jay, I got papers.
Ever the hustler. Ever the
So yeah. So we're gonna make a deal. So that's that. Let me see. So that's that. So the summer was like that. In and out of town from Boston, working out in Boston. Go see Jay. Come in town, see my daughter, see everybody. Let me see. So then maybe like, we're on the boat with Mark Israel. It's like 5 years ago, and Jay's, slowing down, but we won't rebound. Jay and I played like 3,000 games of basketball. Okay, 3,000 games of basketball. And Jay would rebound the ball, and I go, "Jay, what's wrong?" He goes, "Mark, I can't move. I can't. The ball, it came off, and I wanted the ball, and it wouldn't come. I couldn't." And so I would just kick his ass, right? And then, so he got tired of that, so we would take walks. But in that vein, John and I had an
undefeated season. Because John was a hell of an athlete. He was a great athlete, especially when he was young, in the 1970s. And we had an entire summer where I was the thug and he was the shooter. And we were across the city, out here in Venice, in Hollywood, at Wise and stuff like that. We were undefeated. It was the undefeated season. So that was a long time ago. This picture I took for his, we took it in my on my back porch, and so that worked out good. Yeah, so he got a bunch of work from that. He still hasn't paid me for it. But John and I were brothers, and you know, it's amazing that. Oh, Charles Chaplin, yeah, that's great. It's me.
Yeah.
You know, there's so much I could tell you. You know, and so many great dinners at your house, and so much. You know, so many. You know, Christmases and Thanksgivings and Hanukkahs and you know all that stuff. I mean, it's just went on and on and on, and you know, the road goes on forever, and the party never ends, and that's the way it was for all those guys. You know, but it's great to see all my friends here. You know, and from all the years. You know, I love John and Joan as a couple, and you know, Karen and I, and those two we were the inseparable. I'm going to open it up to questions now. This is good. You know, feel free to ask anything you want, and the more controversial you can. Okay, go.
Who's your agent?
Still Julia Blackwell.
Okay.
15 years, yeah. It's been great.
Yeah,
Yeah, it was great. Yeah. Go.
Oh my God, that's real estate.
Well,
Yes.
explain
Yes,
that.
but my favorite song, Who Do You Love, by Bo Diddley.
Nice.
Biggest trouble you ever got in with John?
Over steak for an
Oh yeah, the biggest trouble, I remember.
Biggest trouble you ever got in?
Yeah, it had to do with the bar, and Karen had to come and get you guys because you were so
The
drunk.
biggest trouble. I never. Are we doing my rest record here?
No. John and Chris went
Biggest
out
trouble.
drinking. Remember
Yeah,
that?
Oh, that was just that wasn't trouble. We just came home drunk.
Well, Karen had to come and get you.
No, that's incorrect. There's a couple things that are correct. One is that we were drinking at the hotel in the marina.
Yeah.
And got really super drunk, whiskey. We went down the whiskey train and arrived late for dinner. I drove home completely drunk, and by the grace of God, arrived there. To your Jewish wedding,
Oh, that's
the
right.
Goys signed the ketubah.
That's right. That's right.
Yeah,
That's
okay,
right.
all right,
Yeah.
guys.
Yeah. And Pam, you were there.
Little
You were
facts,
very
yeah.
young.
Yeah. So it was at the Topanga here. What else? Am I boring you? Are you okay with that? What are you doing? So next question. Robin, go.
I forgot the one.
That's great.
Okay. It was very controversial, so.
Now, nothing, mazel tov, okay. So anyhow, I'm really happy to be here, and I'm glad you guys came out, and I love you all, and God bless John, and may he's up in heaven with everybody else, just grooving along. Good luck. Thanks, Carol.
Oh, I will. Amelia? Yeah.
My daughter, Amelia Anderson.
This is Amelia. My love. Thank you. It's my mom.
I think it was going to be 4 years this New Year's Eve. Yes. I like that podium, even though my skirt is hard.
Podium's good.
We all know John, that's why we're here. And then, in considering what to say or write about John, when the important grown-ups in my life pass away, I feel this tremendous sense of responsibility to identify and and speak their impact. Because when you go away, when you pass away, when your body becomes part of the earth or the ground or wherever you get put, all that's left is this reverberant impact, and it's real. Because actually energy doesn't ever really go away; it's continuous. And so I like to, in grieving, identify where that energy still lives and the impact. And so I'm going to talk about John's impact on my life. So, as a lot of you probably know, my parents were both transplants from Minnesota, actors coming out here to do acting for real. And so I grew up without any cousins or aunts and uncles in my life. We were just our little family in Venice. But I had my Uncle John and Joe. John's first memory of me, as he would always recount, was that we were at First Lutheran of Venice, they have a basketball court, and that I was very little, so little that the ball was twice the size of my head, and I was trying to shoot the free throw. He was trying to teach me. It was just insane. I was so tiny and small. He just thought it's incredible, and he would always retell this story at different points in my life. And look at you now. I'm so much bigger than a basketball. Thank you. But I knew what he meant. He would say it with such admiration and love, and I felt profoundly trapped in the way that a family member tracks you and honors your growth. My earliest memory of John and Joan, of course, is the dining room table with my parents. And as a little kid, you were an expert in your parents. And I saw my parents the happiest they ever were with John and Joan at the table. The type of laughter that would come out of them. I knew when John and Joan came through the door, that laughter was coming. And I was thrilled for it, because it felt so good in the home. Before I even understood the jokes. Later, I got to be in on the jokes. Fantastic. Before I even understood it, it was this shining example of what adult friendship would be. Adult friendship, you should be able to laugh so hard you cry. And if you don't, those people are not your friends, they're acquaintances. And then also in witnessing my dad's and John's friendship as it aged. They were each other's confidants. They were each other's therapists. My dad rarely opened up to many people, but he always went to John, and John took that responsibility on with great sacredness. And I miss him for my dad all the time. And then in turn, when John needed my dad, when John was ailing, as much as, and my mom was going through cancer at the same time, and it felt like our whole grown-up family was disassembling, but that's a rite of passage, and it's part of it. My dad, I saw him go visit John, even though it hurt him all the time. I thought, God damn, man, you're a glutton for punishment. You're going to go to David, John. We just did the scan with Mom. Now you're going to go see John. But that's loyalty.
Yeah.
And that's the beauty of true friendship through your lifetime.
Karen would send me, honey.
Yes, I
She said, you're done with me, go see him.
There you go.
She would send you?
Yeah.
My mom had incredible love for John as well. And so that is an impact that I will keep with my life. I look around at my friends and I know, I'm going to check on you. I'm going to check on you. We're partying now, but later it'll be different. And I'm going to do it with you. And that you have this basis because you've had all these laughs around the table that you can then do that. You can then be in the old folks' home and have a weird conversation and a great conversation and tune in and out like FM and AM radio. But John and Joan, in their impact on my life, they made me feel so seen. They're such huge personalities, and you would think a huge personality is going to be about themselves, right? No, not with John and Joan. They were so curious about other human beings. It is a beautiful quality that I take forward in my own life. They were one of the best conversationalists. They're like the epitome of a conversationalist, and I got to learn that growing up. But as a teen, they would ask me questions about my life, and it made me feel like my journey mattered from a very young age, which for young women
trying to have self-esteem, like the impact was immense. I really felt like I mattered at 15, at 16, and that my journey was gonna mean something. And it helped me investigate my own feelings about what I wanted to be and where I was going. And now in the grown-up driver's seat, and I have teens around me, I take that impact forward. I just do you guys. I'm at a table and I see a bored teen, I just John and Joan them. And I see this ongoing impact. And obviously, my Uncle John, I valued his opinion immensely. We would drive after, I worked for Jimmy's Picnics. The filthiest job. Cotton candy and sweat and chicken blood, and that's great, we paid in cash. And I valued John's opinion very much. He was never heavy-handed about it, except in one topic, romance. So every Thanksgiving, John and Joan were fixtures at our table, and I would bring home Ryan, or another Ryan. I love Ryans. And John would always, gently and gracefully chat them up at some point in the evening. And then at pie time, John would gently and gracefully come over to me and say, boy, Ryan, he's a great guy. What a sweetheart. What a good guy. But you're gonna have so many loves in your life. So many loves. And life is long and it's gonna be great. And I knew Ryan wasn't the one, or the next Ryan, or the Billy, or the whatever. And then there was the Thanksgiving I brought home my husband, my now husband, Aubrey.
Okay.
And John did his, that was weird. He just turned towards me. And I saw him, saddle up to Aubrey and chat. Oh, how's this going? And then at pie time, he saddled over to me and was like, boy, Aubrey's really great. You love him a lot, huh? Just gonna go somewhere? Huh? And I didn't get my line. I didn't get the, you'll have so many loves in my life. And he literally said that to me probably 5 times. And I went, oh shit. I guess I'm getting married. And sure enough, a few years later, I was in a cab with John and Joan and my parents in my wedding dress on the Venice Beach. And in the sort of petrified silence that was going on in the cab, because we all couldn't believe I'm about to get married, John broke it with saying, I just remember, Amelia, you were so little, we had this basketball the size of your head, the size of your head, and you were just trying to shoot a free throw, and look at you now. So John and Joan are like such huge blessings in my life. They remind me of the fairies in Sleeping Beauty, that like watch her in her life, except it's the guy from Faces of Death. And I will just always be thankful that John was a part of it. He is one of the most joyful, loving, brilliant, and resilient men I've ever met. And I'm happy that his impact lives on in me and will live on in my children. So I miss you, John. I miss you so much, and I wish that I could have you in a more physical, plain way, but I'm happy to have your impact. Thank you. Her sister Lizzie is as beautiful as she is.
Okay. That was, oh my God, wow, all right. John liked to fix people up.
No good.
That was John's thing. And I remember we have this friend named Treva who has pneumonia, so she's not here tonight. But she brings this guy to our house, and he's like one of the biggest, now he's like one of the biggest producers in town. John's asking him a million questions, and he pulls Treva aside and he goes, he's a man-child.
get rid of him.
Yeah.
And never did. Well, another person that he tried to fix up, that he did try to fix up many, many times is here tonight, and that's Bobby Koch. Bobby.
Yay.
How about you?
I just wrote down a couple of bullet points of things that I wanted to talk about with John. And also, before I say anything, I just want to let you know that Joan is going to be sending out one more email tonight, an update on logistics. When I RSVP'd last night for the 7th time, Joan texted me to make sure I was coming. I was thinking about John. I was like, what a complex man. Like, so simple and so complex, and we met through various like random circumstances. Like a friend of mine knew him, and he knew that I was friends with this actress that he wanted in his movie. So he said, "Bring Robert over," and the movie never happened. But John and I struck up a friendship with, as well as with Joan as well. It's gonna be Roger and Marta. You know, to experience John, like, it was such a, you know, as Chris was saying, and as Amelia was saying, like, when you laughed with John, like, you didn't just laugh with John. Like, it was like a religious experience, like, you laughed. And when John would laugh, and, like, I rarely laughed till I cried, but when I was with John, I would laugh till I cried. Like, literally, you would cry. Whether I was smoking pot on the couch with him or not, you would just cry. And it was just like, you would leave John and Joan's house, you'd always feel good. Even if you had like a political discussion or you didn't agree on everything, like you always left John and Joan's feeling good. And the parties and the Passovers and watching Joan and John and Jimmy do skits and matzah and joints going around. Like it was the greatest Passover you guys. Like, this is LA Passover. You can smoke pot and eat matzah and mimosas.
I never got to go.
This is Judaism. This is like Judaism that I want to be part of. We can do another.
Yeah. Steinbergs. We're going to the
I'm old enough now.
She's old enough now.
I always wanted to play basketball with John. He would never play. Because I play basketball with Jim, with Chris. And I played basketball with these guys for 25 years. It was full court. He goes, I don't play full court. He goes, I do one-on-one with Chris, or I do horse, or I have like my little games. And he would never come to my 5-on-5 games. And I would tell him he's being a wimp. He goes, no, Chris and I play really hard. Sure you do. I've never seen it. My mother, may she rest in peace, had this amazing, like, and really annoying quality. Whenever I would talk to someone, or I would tell her that I was meeting someone, so she would start doing her interrogations, much like John's interrogations of everyone I ever introduced him to. So I was on the phone with John once, and my mother was visiting from New York, and she would always go, who are you talking to? And I go, I'm talking to my friend Peter Miller. I go, ask him if he knows the Millers of blah, blah, blah. But never, for 30 years, my mother did this, never hit. So one time I was on the phone and I was talking to John, and she said, who are you talking to? And I said, my friend John Schwartz. And she would say, ask him if he knows what were his grandparents' names? John's grandparents?
Oh, you mean his mother, Doris and Marty?
No, but their parents.
Oh, I don't know.
He said, ask him if he knows Millie and blah, blah, blah. I go, John, my mother wants to know if you know, Shlomo and Millie. And he goes, those are my grandparents. My mother finally hit. Finally got it. And it turned out that John's grandparents and my grandparents were like best friends. In the 40s and 50s in New York, I used to play bridge or canasta or mahjong or whatever. And it brought like a depth to my friendship with John that like, I could never explain, but it was like we were camp buddies. It was almost like we were friends for life. And knowing that our grandparents hung out on the Upper West Side of Manhattan together, it just like, it made me love him even more. It was just like, it was not something that had ever happened. And then of course I gave my mother carte blanche for another 20 years to ask me if I was related.
And how many women did he fix you up with?
Getting there.
Okay.
John was like lovingly odd. He was sincere. He was brilliant. He was combative. He was kind. He told more people to fuck off than I ever could have imagined that I would ever tell, because I've told a lot of people to fuck off. He and Joan, but John especially, John was determined to feel like I was the eternal bachelor for a decade of my life, and I just didn't find the right person, and I was a dating serial dater, which partially was to blame on John, because there was John would go on dog walks or just walk in Venice, and he would call me and go, I got someone. There was an 18-month period of my life where John fixed me up on 32 blind dates. It was endless. One of them was supposed to be here tonight. I'm thankful she's not. Sorry she's not, but John and Joan were like, come over, you're going to meet this girl, and she's really nice, and she ended up not being a match for me, but her mother ended up being my next agent. So it actually worked out.
That's right, fair enough, yeah.
Nicely done.
But he would always meet people, and then if I was to meet somebody, I would bring them over to John and John's, because of course they had to check them out. And I go, John, don't do the Schwartz interrogation. Because he needed to pry, like he was almost like the pervy uncle, but he wasn't a pervy uncle. Like he really wanted to know, like he was so inquisitive. And he really wanted to know, like what made that person tick, or what made them think, or he would probe, he'd be like, so you studied blah, 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 so what is it about you, like, so what were your feelings about your father? And he would probe like he was this therapist. And it was endearing, and it would make me crazy, and I'd be like, John, don't scare this one off. You can ask your questions, but don't like do 60 questions. So to hear that he was protective of all of us, you know, is another testament to John's huge heart, and that he had to approve. And that we looked to John for his approval because we loved him and trusted him that much. You know? He really wanted to know what was inside your brain and inside your psyche. And he wasn't afraid to probe. And I think that was part of John's beauty, is like, you know, he goes, you know, everyone thought his faces of death, that I was this weird dude. And he goes, we faked everything. Everything in the movie was fake. And he goes, but everyone thinks that I'm like this dark. And he truly, I mean, he did have this funny dark side, but it wasn't like this evil, dark. It was just like, he wanted to know, like, what was in your brain and what made you tick. I owed to him, and it was miraculous to watch. And John and Joan were so devoted to their animals, and they lived in, you know, 2 square feet with 6 animals. And every time an animal would pass on, there'd be another framed poem. In the bathroom. In the bathroom, where you pee and you go, oh, there's a poem. Like, oh, Whiskers passed on. I'm going to read a new poem from John.
You pee and cry.
And he always wanted to know, and I share this quality, like, every time you got, like I would say, John, I'm going to bring over, like when he was in the hospital, I would bring over like food. I'm going to go get you a sandwich, pastrami, or corned beef. What do you want, pastrami or corned beef? He'd be like, from where? Where are you going? Like, John, do you want a fucking sandwich or no? From where? I go, I'm going to go to Canada's. He was like, give me pastrami. I go, you want a black and white cookie? He's like, all right, I'll take a black. I had to like push him. I was like, and I had him over for salmon. He goes, where'd you get the salmon? John, you don't need to know. He goes, no, where'd you get the salmon? He had to know. I was like, Kramer, you have to know and that was where I met John, because I was the same way. And we met at, John treasured the sacred as much as he treasured the profane. Like, and he could mix them up in 1 second. And there was no separation. They kind of went together. I was talking to Wendy about him, and she said, I would always run into him at the gym. And I ran into him so much that I used to pad an extra 30 minutes into my day, knowing that when I ran into John at the gym, we were going to talk for 30 minutes. And she's like, and it's not like I resented, she's like, I actually was looking forward to it.
That's Wendy.
And that's Wendy. And that's, that's part of the beauty of John, is like, he would talk, and that's, how he met all my blind dates, but he would talk to people. He really wanted to talk to people. He loved people as much as he had the cynical, jaded side that I shared with him as well. Like, he really wanted to know who you were, what it was about you, and what your heart was about. And, just hear you talk about boyfriends that you didn't approve of until he approved of your husband. Like, it mattered. And it not only mattered to you, but it mattered to him. And that's a testament to John's love and how deep he was. And we would go through periods where we saw each other all the time, and then we would have long stretches where we didn't see each other. And when you saw him again, it was like no time passed.
Right.
And if there was something he was annoyed with you about, you'd be like, you know what?
Yeah,
I was
right.
mad at you about something. He would voice it. And I think that's, so much of what you said, about him modeling that kind of behavior, like seeing him talk, seeing your parents talk. And he really was one of a kind.
Yeah, absolutely.
My child care is pretty much over.
Good to see you as a grown person. You're fabulous.
This is the monkey Anderson exit. Because I'm Papa.
Dad, I love you.
I'll see you soon. Okay.
Thank you.
God, I feel like this is the hiking time. Okay. I'm having a beautiful morning.
I was not here first.
Evan. Okay.
Okay, I'm gonna go out there. Oh my God. I'm just working in the room. I love you guys. This is babysitters. This is like the second deal, right? Okay.
I love you. Bye, baby.
I don't know if you know about Jewish people, but we don't camp. Except, okay, Robin and Evan, oh my God, I love you guys. We spent a lot of time with you guys, New Year's Eve, everything. Evan took John camping. And he'll tell you about it.
John and I went camping. It's kind of amazing to hear everybody's perspective about John and to kind of put it into context. And I think we all share a similar feeling about John because everybody says kind of the same things. And one of the great things that he did is he brought people together like nobody else. He would go out of his way to seek and find people and bring them into this family, which is all of us, actually, in a strange way. And it's really rare, magical, and impressive to see a man that can do that in the world that we live in today. And that was one of the main things that really enamored me with John. He felt like a big brother to me when I met him. I fell in love with him and Joan. The first party I met them at, and I said, Robin, we've got to meet these people and we've got to hang out with them a lot. And we did for 25 years, and they were our great friends. And I have a passion for camping and hiking and outdoors, and as John would be the first person to say, Jews don't camp. And I said, John, there's this place, it's down by San Diego, it's Anza Borrego, it's like being in the biblical Holy Land. It's the most incredible place. There's streams that come out of the mountains. There's giant palm trees. It's really cool. You can hear a pin drop. It's so quiet. And we were drinking and smoking, and he's like, that sounds interesting. I said, let's go camping. He's like, okay, let's do this. Very adventuresome. He would always be ready for an adventure, be anything. He would always be interested. So I took him to Anza-Borrega Desert. We drove out there. It's just basically you're sleeping on the sand. There's no anything around you, right? And John was just kind of blown away by the beauty of it. It's an incredible place. And there's some great pictures in here of us camping. Please take a look. And we set up the campsite, we pitch the tent, we get up, we have some food, we're relaxing, the sun goes down, it's just magical, the colors, everything. And then we're kind of just sitting there chatting, and then all of a sudden, about 2 hours later, John starts freaking out. He's like, Evan, oh my God, Evan. I go, well, John, what the hell? He's like, there's this giant light, it's coming up from, I don't know what the hell it is. I'm like, John, that's the moon. And it rose, and it was really bright, and it blew his mind. It was so incredible. And we went to bed, we had a great night's sleep, we woke up in the morning, and we had some breakfast, and then John's kind of walking around, and he goes, Evan, where do I go to the bathroom? And I said, go over there, dig a hole, do your business. And he was like, okay. Never done it. Then a coyote decided to come up into our camp. And this coyote comes up, and John was losing his frickin' mind. He loved animals, but this one was kind of wild, and it was coming really close, really quick. And John was like, what do we do? What do we do? I said, well, what do you think you do? You grab some strawberries and you start throwing them. So John started picking up some strawberries, and we're throwing the strawberries, and the coyote's eating the strawberries. And it was just one of those magical moments with John that I think we've all had, that he enjoyed adventures, life, people, spirit, and he'll be missed greatly.
Yeah.
I forgot, you named the coyote.
Oh, we
You
haven't
gave him
yet.
some, like, you know,
I forgot.
you gave him some beautiful names. And Evan's wife is like, not only is she, I don't want to give her resume, not only is she a fantastic actress, but she's like the most beautiful person with such the most incredible heart. I mean, I don't want to throw that word around with spiritual, but I mean, she's just an angel, Robin.
Oh my God.
And John loved her. John
Lower
loved
your
her.
expectations.
John loved her so much.
And the words that continually recur in everybody's recollection of John is party and laughter. It's just ubiquitous in everybody's experience with him. And I don't mean to be repetitive, but it bears repeating. I mean, laugh until you cry, laugh hard. His smile was one of the best things. When Evan was looking through some of the pictures, you know, I just went, oh, that one, I remember that face coming towards me and sharing experiences. And we had them over often for Christmas. I can remember standing at that one little bar, eating in the house on Laurel Canyon, and drinking chilled vodka and eating caviar. And it was so much fun. And on a Christmas, we were doing the decorating of the tree. Some pictures are in here too. And you know, everybody they have their own way about getting the lights around the tree. You know, people can be very particular about that. Well, it was like we'd all taken acid. I don't know why. I'm sure we had something, maybe a little bit. But somehow the lights all got, you know, everywhere, and so it became the double weave. It wasn't a mistake. It was no, says John. This is the double weave that we're doing here. And so we have pictures of all of that, and then but the laughter and the pleasure, and as you say, and his absolute curiosity for everything and everybody. And it was, I mean, when you mentioned some of those things, how did you feel about your father? And I'm going, wait, no, that's too deep to go with a total stranger. But he would go there and they would answer, and it was always kind of love at first sight with everyone that he loved and that Joan and he brought into their home. it's just, he's definitely gonna be missed, but it's so lovely to have him brought back to us all by everyone's memories, so.
That was beautiful. Oh, God, that was beautiful.
Lovely. All right, let's see. Okay, Yvette.
Well, I don't really like standing up in front of tons of people.
No, you can get over it.
Yes, you do.
Yeah, God, okay.
Here's the thing.
He called us 6:30 in the morning.
Johnny called me at 6:30 in the morning for 23 years.
Oh my God.
And every time he called me, he'd say to me, "Are you up? Are you up?" I went, "What are you, crazy? Get up, I'm walking the dog." I said, "Where's Johnny?" He said, "Home." I said, "Well, what's she doing?" "Sleeping." I said, "What are you doing now?" He said, "I'm walking the dogs. We have to talk about my new product. We have to," I said, "Johnny, I'm sick." He said, get up. We have to talk about my physical ailments." I said, "What's wrong with you physically?" "Well, I have this one thing and I have this, that." This was his favorite thing, talking to me about whatever was wrong with him physically. He thought I was a doctor. I mean, this was a daily occurrence for 22 years. I said, "What's wrong now?" "Oh, my hand hurts. What do you think? Which doctor should I go to?" I said, "Well, this may be this one." He goes, "Well, like I do with Adrian." I asked Carl what to go to. He asked me. I said, "But, well, what?" And there's something wrong with my toe. And my behind hurts. And I went, "Johnny, I have to go back." No, let's have breakfast together." I said, "Where?" "On the phone. Just go down into the kitchen and have your coffee and we'll talk." I said, "Where's Johnny?" "She's sleeping." I said, "What are you going to do?" "I'm going to bring her home bagels right now." I said, "Now? You're doing this now?" "Well, I do it every day." I never knew that John, for 25 years, my close friend who I met through Adrian actually, to the bagel place where he got the best bagels supposedly, and bring her home a bagel and cream cheese and coffee every day of her life. I never knew this, but he told me, and I didn't believe him, I thought that was ridiculous, but he said, no, she'll be very mad about it. I said, okay, and then of course I represented him for a while, and that was trippy, because he would interview me on a daily basis about what I was going to do for the day for him, every day. So 365 days a year until he decided to drop me and move on. But that was okay, because he was always my best friend. And then we did a project together while I was living in North Carolina, which was the most hilarious, and I got married to a Southerner. And he came out, and we did this whole thing that he said, "She's a terrible actress." I said, "What are we going to do?" He said, "Kill her." What do you mean we're going to? He said, "Yeah, we'll fix it on the tape, don't worry, we'll get rid." So we said, we'll try. He came into the house, I was married to this guy, and he saw ESPN, and then he saw everything that was Republican. He said, "Get rid of him. He said, "He's not for you, can't you tell?" Like Amelia said. He said, "You just got to get rid of him." And he was there for a week, right? Imagine, John and I talking about how he was going to do it, and he better be here the minute it all happens. I said, "Okay," and I was, believe it or not, John.
Yeah.
I was, but then he said to me, when we look at the stuff together at night, he said, "She can't act." I said, "I know." I thought she could. He said, "I'm going to kill you." I said, "Please don't kill me." I believed it. He said, "When you're sleeping tonight, lock your door." But this went on, and then, it's like I was with him when he was that night with Joni and me, and he said, "What's wrong with me?" Another one of his doctor questions. I said, "Nothing, maybe it's your heart or something." He said, "Joni, let's investigate my heart." It was like he had to investigate everything to the very core of his being and investigate everybody else around him 24/7. He asked me more questions in my life than I knew him than anybody ever asked me in my 25 years of life, which is how old I am. So I just want to say that, I don't think in the heart of my heart I will ever get over losing this dear friend. I went to every one of their parties. I couldn't come because of cats. I'd come for 2 hours, I'd leave because I'm allergic to cats. But I'd come, and they came to all my breakfasts, and they came to the Passover, and they came to all my tree trim parties. And Johnny again would tell me how to do the lighting of the tree. He was an expert. And then finally he said, "Oh, this is very boring. can't do this anymore. But I have to say that I just, I loved him with every cell of my body. He's a friend. He was like my brother. And I will forever miss him. And I know he's protecting us from upstairs because that's who he was. He was so protective of me, if anything he thought I would do wrong or that would hurt me, or if my son wasn't feeling well, anything that was going wrong, he would drive over just to talk and ask me questions to see how Stevie was. And anyway, I love you, John. I always will, and I know that you will always be talking about me to God because you can't help it.
Thank you. Well, a lot of people that John did projects with, where is she? A lot of people that became John's friends, he wound up like doing projects with, because he would wake up every day with a different idea. No, every day he'd wake up for a different idea of a reality show. He couldn't help himself. And I found reality very boring, but I tried to seem interested. And Carol, he created a reality show with Carol, who I was actually in it, but they became really good friends. And this is Carol, everybody. And I'm so glad you came to
I love you.
Oh. Well, I might not have had as many, like, I don't think it was 20, well, it was actually the early 90s that we met. And the way we met was because John called me up because I do a lot of television. I'm a psychiatrist. And so I do a lot of expert, commentary on television. And one day he calls me up and he wanted to get together. I don't know that he told me, I don't think he told me the details of the project then, but he wanted to get together to talk about a project. So he was trying to, I was a little leery, and he was trying to introduce himself, and he said, I think this was supposed to make me feel more confident to meet him, or like, he's so important, but not in that way. He was self-effacing in a sense, but anyway, he told me that he was the one who did Faces of Death. Now, at that time, and for most of my life, I have been a very active anti-media violence person. I testified before Congress. I protested in front of violent movies when they come to movie theaters and so on. So the worst thing that he could have told me was that in fact, I think I did do things about Faces of Death. But anyhow, I decided, okay, whatever. He was charming, and so I met him. And going to their house in Venice, this is when they were living in Venice, and it's always so hard to park there and all that. It was like such a schlep. I guess I was living in Calabasas at the time. But the thing is that as much as it was a pain to find a parking spot, going to John and Joan's house, for whatever reason, to work on the project, to have a party, a dinner, whatever, it was like, it was like a warm nest. And you walk out of there, someone was mentioning something like this, you walk out of there glowing. It was like so grateful for that experience. So his project was to do this reality show called Reality Check. It was his idea, and it was a great idea. It still is a great idea. And I'm going to tell you the idea so that if any of you can pitch it, I will be sharing half of the proceeds with Joe. The story was, the project was that I would do, like a talk show, radio talk show, therapist answering questions. I sometimes have done that. And so the idea was to do that, like 5-10 minute kinds of conversations with people, but to actually go there, not to do it on the radio, but to go to different interesting places and do this 5 or 10 minute kind of conversation and solve their problems in the 5 or 10 minutes. And so we did this demo in all different places, like at a high school, on the basketball court near a high school, at our job, so they had all different kinds of problems, high school problems, somebody with job problems. We did a thing with Joan, it was great, at a bar in Venice, and I don't know, we did a few more scenarios, but that was the gist of it. And it really turned out to be a great demo tape, but it's still a great idea because there isn't anything like that. John should have deserved to have been the head of a studio. He deserved, he had all these creative ideas coming a mile a minute, and his thoughts, his ideas for shows were so much better, and for movies and so on, were so much better than the kinds of things, a lot of the things that we see now. And he just deserved to get that kind of recognition. What else did I want to say? You know, of course, the laughter and so on. One thing that no one has mentioned yet that always used to impress me was how in love John and Joan were. Not just love, but like passionate love. It was like they were going to have sex any minute. Right on the floor, anytime. I mean, it was so beautiful. So, you know, beautiful to see that they had so much passion for each other. And I guess by the 90s, they had been together for somewhat of a while, and it was like every day was a new, it was like they were just in love, just falling in love. And what else? Well, I just want to say, you know, there are some people who, they're so full of life and larger than life that it's so hard to imagine that they're dead, deceased, passed, whatever you like to call it. But, and I mean, we actually, my daughter and I actually met with Joan and John about 3 years ago or so. We had in Topanga, we had pizza together, and we saw that, you know, John would go in and out a little bit with the, you know, AM radio kind of thing, but I don't think we knew about it yet, and so it was like I kept thinking maybe I was not following. There was something wrong with me. And I didn't want to believe also that there was some kind of a problem, so that was part of it. But I think, you know, from what everybody's been talking about tonight, asking the questions and, you know, being so creative and all that, it almost feels like he used up, his brain was burning all the time with all these creative ideas and all this love and all this curiosity and so on. And I guess this was the price. But it's so beautiful to hear people's stories because, you know, and because it helps me to remember times too, and it's so beautiful to honor him in this way. He was one of a kind, and I am and was so grateful that he was in my life. And the number to call for the reality check.
I played number 6 last night.
Yeah, that
I
was
remember
it.
that. With Dean, John and Dean. John and Dean, it sounds like they're detectives. Dean is this extraordinary artist, and they created these magical shows together, and one of them was called come here, you want to tell the story? What was it, Triple Treat? Oh, it was so cool.
I'm not used to talking in front of people.
Turn your back to them.
Okay. Yeah, big mirror. and I lost it with the song, so it's just catch up. Right? You know, John and I were writing partners through the 90s, and I met John. I'd been merchandising entertainment and creating marketing campaigns, and I sold a lot of television for other people, but I hadn't created my own. And somebody said, you and John have to get together. And it was like bringing these two guys together, and we met, and it was like, all of a sudden, it was like a thing. And we sold our first script within a week of doing it, and then we had to write it. And, you know, I mean, John had, you know, just to put it in perspective, I'd worked with a lot of people, and so I'm a little out of breath, I don't really do this.
You're doing great.
Yeah.
And one of the things with John is that he was always ahead of the curve. He had created tabloid news shows that were the thing to come. He had created dance competition shows that hadn't happened yet. He had dating shows, just like the one you were talking about, that were very personal. And you know, and a lot of the things are the staple of what's going on today. And So I came from writing a page, writing a page for advertising or a campaign to market a movie or things like that. And sitting down with John, all of a sudden it was story structure, it was character, it was this deep thing that I was like, holy crap, And John was so patient with me, because to me it's like, okay, so we've got this merchandise here, and it'll do this. And John's like, no, we've got to have a story behind that, we've got to have characters behind that. And so John was so patient with me and taught me story structure, taught me everything about writing. And I just couldn't believe how otherworldly John was. And it reminded me of well,
We get it. It's good, it's all good.
well, anyway, so I'll tell you stories. Okay, so he, a few stories of pitching. I remember the only time I've ever seen John meet his match with somebody as far as digging into their character, because John would do it anyway. We'd be in a restaurant, there'd be an interesting or odd person, John would say, hey, and he'd start a conversation. We were in our agent's office at one point, we were all waiting for a meeting, there was just John and I and this kind of odd-looking woman, and so John started in on her with the, so tell me about yourself, and she started in on him. Yeah, the same thing. It was like watching two titans go at it as far as digging into the characters. And I was like, oh my God, this woman's amazing. And we went into our meeting and John goes, that is the smartest woman I've ever seen. He said, she really knows character. It ended up it was Genji Cohen.
Oh.
Yeah. So, with Treeples, Treeples was a show, John, I constantly say to John, why don't we do something that's within the horror genre? John's like, no, my karma can't do any more of that. And John had a knack for, he loved education, he loved kids shows, he loved the idea of doing something that empowered or educated while it was entertaining. He referred to Montessori schools and things like that. And we created a show called Treeples. And Treeples was essentially our version of Sesame Street. It taught kids everything they needed to know. It was
beautiful. The Treeples Tree of Truth. Yeah, and you.
Joan was kind of the star of it. Anyway, our first pitch with that, we went in, and I already had a show with Brandon Tartikoff, and so it was with Brandon Tartikoff. We were there for a 15-minute meeting, and we were there for 3 hours. Now, I'm not really a people person. I'm not really good at talking about things, but John was, and Brandon was, and we were there for 3 hours because Brandon wouldn't let us go. And he said, this is magic, I've got to have it. And by the time we left his office, it was like Grand Central Station. Everybody goes, who are these guys? Because it was like, they stacked their meetings by minutes. And he said, I said, well, I feel bad that we've kept you for so long. He said, this is the most important meeting of the day. And it was one of the shows that he wanted to take with him when he left New World, but New World was all in disarray and all of that, so it didn't end up going there. But that was, that was an interesting thing. We had a pitch at Sony, and I don't remember the project, but it was with this woman, during the time of the John Peters era at Sony. And it was a beautiful woman, about 6 feet tall, young executive in her 30s, who's just flying, and she was brilliant. And John started asking her all of these questions, and then he started telling her, you're in this business, and he started telling her his experience. And if John would ask somebody about their relationship, are you in love? Do you have a boyfriend? Do you have a dog? Tell me about your dog. Tell me about this. And he'd know them, and it wasn't superficial. It was always this deep, meaningful thing. He would make friends with these people that we were pitching to, these soulless executives. And so with this woman, John said, well, let me tell you something. And he told a whole story about Joan. He said, about his life and about his career, and how the most important thing in his life was Joan. And so by the time we were through, it ended up maybe a month later, the woman left Sony and went on a different career because, of course, she would be churned up in that place that she was. But it felt like a lot of the time that John would almost like to tell people about what he had found in Joan, about that relationship. One of the first shows we created was something called Atomic Outpost Avengers. And John and I had gone around the corner to the cows inn to write it. We'd spent all day. We thought we were really amazing. And, Joan was always, John's rock and his compass and everything. We thought it was great. And we had written this meaningful thing, and it had drama, it had tragedy, it had everything. It was about these kids in this nuclear world fighting these monsters, and it was laden with merchandise. The merchandise John could dig into these characters. And we got back, and it's like, let's share it with Joan, because Joan was always the sounding board, always. It's like, forget Spielberg, we've got Joan. Joan started to read it, and says, are you guys out of your fucking mind? You're starting this pilot episode with a tragedy of the parents dying of the kids, and it was just, but John's like, but it brings emotion, you can't do that. So he went to do it the whole thing. And John was pretty otherworldly, as anybody knows. I know he's here, I know he's listening, and I know he's going to be with you. I have a ton of stories of, him essentially teaching a class at Nickelodeon with the executives while we were pitching, or with the Mossad in these meetings, or smoking pot with our lawyers in their office, we had terrible luck with Fox. Fox was always going to be an adventure. We went in, and after the Australians bought it, they had all these weirdos in there. And this one guy, I didn't know how important soccer was, but he was watching soccer while we were pitching it to him. And John just blew a gap. There were very few things. John, if you had a concern or somebody had a thought, he'd ask them to justify it, or he'd take it at value. But if it was just kind of bullshit, he would just go ballistic. And this guy was watching TV during a pitch. I didn't care, but John was like, John was ready to throw the guy's TV out the window. And then finally the guy turned it off and said, well, okay, pitch it. And John goes, I don't want to pitch to you anymore, we're leaving. Let's go. Another time there was and again, one of the Australian weirdos, this guy became a huge reality show producer. And we pitched a show to him, I don't, again, remember which one. But the guy decided he was going to tell John about characters. And that's just dangerous characters. So the guy starts saying, well, you've got to change a character like this, or I don't feel like there's enough depth in this and this and this. And John says, you going to buy it? And the guy says, well, you need to change these characters. You need to change these characters. And John leans to me and says, this guy can't buy it. And the guy says, well, if you change these characters, I says, so let me hear what you're saying. Because John's like, all of a sudden John's like this, And the guys started, and they both were getting chesty with each other. The guy's telling John about character. And finally the guy said, so the tempers were flying, and John said, the guy said, if you change the characters like this, any studio in the world would be stupid not to buy this. And John's like, I'm not changing anything. I go, wait. I go, okay, we'll change the characters. Will you buy it? And the guy says, oh no. And John goes, I knew you were full of shit. But and then the last show we pitched at Fox, and that was probably our last pitch, was something. A Fox executive came to us and wanted to do a show. It was right up John's alley. It was a women's rollerblading league, Rollerblade Federation, RBF. And so we pitched it at Fox, and it was championed by this executive who was this Australian executive. And her best friend was her boss. And it was a great show. It had all the depth, it had all the drama, it had everything John loved in a show, it had all the merchandise I loved in a show. And it ended up that there was some conflict between the two women executives. The one didn't want her best friend to do this. And she said, if I can't sell this show here, it means I can't get a show sold at Fox. And and she said, if I can't sell it, I'm gonna quit. John goes, she'll never quit. And she quit. Anyway, that was our last
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you. Okay, you want,
Thank you. I think I got everybody that wanted to speak, yes? I think. I did, okay.
Hey, Ron.
Thank you, everybody. There's to each.
Oh, goody.
And, yeah, John was one of a kind. What can I say? And he's here, and
Yeah.
he had a great time.
yeah, good.
He had a great time. And you were all wonderful. Thank you.
Thanks.
So
Here's
much.
to you, John. As usual. That's just he would be. He is happy.
He is happy.
He is.
That's right. And you all brought him to life.
And you know what? I'm Robin.
That's Robin.
What's your name? Carol.
Patty, Roger, Bad Roger.